that Robert's mom?
That's my mom.
How are you?
I'm doing well at the office today. So we consider ourselves to be an essential business in the state of Florida. So we're not adhering to the that they essentially we have to ship cigars because essentially we have to pay people so they can essentially fuck themselves. So
That's a good mentality to have.
yeah, no, I'm
Yeah,
here
no,
with my one of my business partners, and then we have optional employees come in, that type of thing, 1 day a week just to get stuff out. So
so,
got to keep
so
the wheels turning.
I was about to say, so you've been able to maintain some resemblance of normalcy and charge for it with your business?
Not really, but as good as possible, I guess.
Yeah,
Last week it was kind of okay, and then this week, I mean, you're not selling much compared to what you normally do, but whatever's there is helpful.
right. Is this usually a busy time of year for you with it
Yeah,
being spring?
we start gearing up typically right around now, so it's not our best time. It's coming into summer, I guess about a month towards the end of April, I think we really crank, but right now, I think we're lower than we were last year by a considerable amount this month, probably about half. But our expenses are way down. So all things considered, it's not as bad as it could be. So yeah.
Wow. Well, I mean, this is as I tell people, it's a very casual conversation. I know I have a lot of followers that like Caldwell, but they may not know the full story of what you do and how you got into the industry. And I always kind of look at these deep cuts as a way to kind of dive in deeper, because I know we did a story for tobacco business a couple of years ago, back in 2018. So that's still in the cigar world, that's a long time ago.
Yeah.
So, just to kind of catch up and kind of get a recap of that story and figure out where you are now and where you're headed.
Sure.
So, I mean, I said I know a little bit of your story, but I don't know if everybody does. So how did you, prior to getting into the cigar business, what were you doing?
So I was working in commercial real estate, and I've been an avid cigar consumer since I was very young. I think I had my first premium cigar when I was about 12 years old. And then about 11, 12 years ago, I started a cigar company in Miami, a hotel and restaurant distribution company. And I was meaning to be the investor and have a friend of mine run the business. So he was working for a retail store. So I had this idea, okay, let's start doing this, distributing cigars to restaurants and hotels. You run it, I'll put in the money, and then we'll be partners. And then after about 2 or 3 weeks, he decided he needed a paycheck and he couldn't work for equity in the company. So I started doing it like nights and weekends and that type of stuff. And then it slowly started growing. And then I started manufacturing private labels to sell through to those accounts. And then from there, I ended up renting a building in an area in Miami. And I was good friends with Christian Aroa at the time. And so we ended up building a cigar factory there. And that was very, very cool, but very short-lived. We didn't really get along as business partners. So then we kind of scrapped that and then went back to the drawing board and came up with the idea for Caldwell. So I ended up partnering with a good friend of mine, Hernando, and then I had another friend come in, and then so anyways, we ended up launching the company about 6 years ago, and that's it. So completely accidental. I mean, I didn't have the intention of getting into the cigar industry. It just kind of happened. Even when I was, when I started the hotel and restaurant thing, I was meaning for that to be like a thing that I had, and I was kind of doing the business side of it. And then, I was trying to get somebody to run that company and never could find the right person. That's the wrong person. He ran it for a little while for me. And then, even with Caldwell, when I came out with the idea for Caldwell, I was kind of like, all right, let's build this business. And we wanted to do other things. And then I didn't want to be the face of the company. I just wanted to be, like kind of like the creative mind behind it, doing the business side of it, but not the operations and not necessarily, being the brand as a person. And then so it just like, I guess whatever you plan to do, you don't do it. You just do what the hell happens, and that's what happens. So
I was about to say, what's it been like to become basically the face of this brand? Because like you said, you wanted to stay in the background, and all of a sudden you saw that there was a need for you to step in front basically of the camera and become the face of the brand. So what was that transition like?
Very challenging. So when we started, I mean, I hit the ground running. We started about a month before we had product, or maybe 5 weeks. We went out to California to sell cigars on our first sales trip. And we had produced at that point 80,000 cigars. I had them in production to come in on the first import. And then we ended up selling all those cigars within about 4 or 5 weeks. And then we were just kind of like off to the races trying to produce enough cigars to sell them. And then I really quickly realized that I had to be out in the field. So that was very difficult because at that point in time, we didn't really have the company set up in a smooth way where it would operate. So it's like, I'd go out and I'd work for 4 or 5 days selling cigars all week, fly in town, go straight to the warehouse, pack and ship cigars, get them all out, be working on the accounting, be working on the packaging, fly down to DR, fly back, fly out again the next day. So the beginning, I was traveling between 300 and 330 days a year. So it was just a tremendous amount of time to be on the road. And that was something I didn't anticipate. I expected, I'd travel 10 days a month or something like that. So in that sense, I was caught off guard because the physical requirement in terms of time spent traveling was far greater than I ever thought that it would be. And that was something I didn't factor in at all. So luckily during that time, I had another business partner come in who's my third partner, a guy named Juan, and he came in, he did the ordering, all the inventory management, collections, receivables, invoices, stuff like that. So he took off a lot of that burden that we just completely mismanaged. And then, I don't know, it started to kind of smooth out, but my time on the road has maintained a pretty high level the whole time. So,
Right.
except for right now. Right now, I don't have to travel.
I was about to say, what's it been like to not travel? Because I've spoken to a couple of different people in the industry, and people like Herklotz and Matt, who are used to being on the road all the time. And
Yeah,
now to not travel is like
it's very strange.
Yeah.
Hey, now that being said, I've never liked how much I've had to travel. Um, so I've always enjoyed, during the winter holidays or just after the trade show, or just before that, you had that lull. But I correlated to this. Like, I'm not like, I don't have to have a cigar every day, right? Like, I love cigar smoking. I'll smoke 1, 2, 5, 10 cigars, whatever I want to smoke. But, if my palate's messed up or if, I don't feel like it, I'll go a couple of days without smoking, no big deal. And so, like, I was in Australia over the holidays, and the cigar culture there, they have cigar culture there, but you have to find it. But there's not really a walk down the street smoke thing. They're very kind of hard on cigar smoking, cigarette smoking, any tobacco consumption. You can't smoke at parks. You can't smoke at restaurant terraces. You can't smoke on your hotel room terrace. You can't smoke at the beach. So after about 2 days on that trip, I said, I'm not enjoying trying to like smoke.
Right.
So I just said, fuck it. So I stopped smoking. So I spent 19 days without having a cigar. And there was a couple times where I could have had a cigar. Like I had an Airbnb, I had a nice outdoor space, but then it was raining and it was cold. So there was no right ambiance for me to enjoy a cigar. And, cigar smokers, we're not like huddling in a circle, smoking under the rain. It's you want to enjoy what you're doing. So then I just used it as an opportunity to really clean my palate, have a few weeks to kind of like just not smoke, come back, whatever. So that was fine. Now I had to spend a period of time without smoking by way of insurance. And so you can't smoke for 10 days. What? 3 hours into I can't smoke for 10 days, I lost my mind because I knew I couldn't do it.
Right.
And I couldn't do it for 10 days. And so it's the same correlation. Like, I mean, I don't mind not traveling and I like not traveling. I like being home. Sometimes I feel like I travel too much. I want time, off, but being told I can't. And not only that, but I can't get in my car and drive an hour and stay in a hotel, in Palm Beach and relax up there for a day. Not having any of those opportunities available to me and being forced into a position that I have no control over, that sucks. So and I give a 6-day long road trip, visiting 5-6 stores a day, cigar event every night. That's torture. Nobody likes to do that. It's after a day or two, you burn out, you're tired, you want to go home, you're cranky. It's hard to stay on top of your business when you're out in the field the entire time. So those are things that I don't think any cigar manufacturer enjoys. We all need like a reprieve to make sure that everything's working. But I mean, I paid like $5,000 to do that right now. Like, make me visit 100 stores a day, eat Taco Bell every meal, stay in a shitty hotel every night. I'll gladly do that just to like break this monotonous routine that I have going currently, you know?
Yeah, I'll be interested to see how the industry kind of restarts itself after this kind of lets up a little bit. Like you said, if they're a little bit more excited about getting out there, if they're a little bit more motivated, how this changes. I've seen a lot of companies try to pivot during this time to incorporate more digital stuff, realizing that they kind of need it. They need little informal interviews like this to keep the brands kind of going when they can't travel, or
Mm-hmm.
just to kind of add it in so that they can be in two places at one time. I know Matt said, if he could do this and then travel at the same time, then he can do double the amount of events. I guess it
Yeah.
took this kind of situation for people to kind of look at a different alternative and a different way of doing business.
Yeah, and also forcing the hand. Like I detest social media. I hate anything technological, and I really, really hate social media. And I still do. But it's a great utility for times like this. And then so that realization is there where and my social media sucks. I mean, anything that you see coming out of us is my business partner, Hernando. He'll go and he'll post things online and do this type of stuff, and then I'll occasionally do it, but I really don't like it. But then when you do stuff like this, you're like, oh, well, maybe there is, like, I throw out the baby with the bathwater when it comes to that sense. Like, there's a great advantage to doing this type of stuff. And that's something that I will continue to do going forward that prior I would have never done it. And I mean, that's a learning curve that I was forced into because of this circumstance. Otherwise, I never would have done it because I'm not gonna take the time to figure out how to do this shit. I don't know how to use Instagram Live until 10 days ago. You know what I
Right.
mean? And what type of audience you can have, and direct connection with consumers and this type of thing, in a captive audience. Because you could do what we're doing right now. Guys are going to ask questions. Guys are going to do this. You can have that interactive side of your business with a 10-minute. Hey, I'm going to go live for 10 minutes. Ask me anything on Instagram, and you connect with tons of consumers. And I think that's very valuable. And to that point, our business is so antiquated that a lot of brand owners, they have like a marketing guy that does that if they do, but they don't have that connectivity. So now they do. And then also retailers, you have so many retailers that are used to, I'll order when the rep comes to my store.
All right.
Well, the rep's not coming to your store right now. So maybe they'll learn to be a little bit more proactive with their ordering and not wait till the rep. Because, yeah, you can wait till the rep comes to your store, but also the rep can come to your store, do a cut and light, do events, do things like that to get, the brand more integrated in the store, which to me is a rep's job. Taking an order is the second thing that they do. So maybe this drives the retailers a little bit more, towards the front of that to be more proactive, to stay on top of their inventory. And when it goes down, not wait till Jimbo comes in, but just, hey, I need the cigar, reach out to me,
Right. Yeah, because I was thinking about that the other day. That you know, it's a two-sided issue basically, because you could be a manufacturer who's very internet savvy and very Instagram forward and all that. The social media, you jump on the trends, but if your customer base isn't, which is sometimes like the retailers, then you're gonna run into a lot of issues. Like a lot of the retailers, unfortunately, I didn't feel like we're very prepared for a situation like this, and I don't think
No.
anybody could have predicted not not being able to operate as normal for a month or however long this goes on.
Yep.
And so it makes you kind of think, hopefully, like maybe this makes the everybody, retail manufacturers, re-examine technology a little bit. And like you said, they don't have to fully embrace it and go 100% pedal to the metal, but they at least need to kind of think about how to integrate it a little bit more to plan for other
Yeah.
disruptions like
But I
this.
think that's a great advantage also, because if the market slowly shifted over a course of time, a lot of people don't feel the shift. And then it becomes too late, and then they say, I'm fucked. I'm going to go do whatever. But with a hard movement like this, where you immediately realize what you have to do to engage or to stay relevant or to do business, well, we were here, Now we're going to go, now we're here, and then we're going to go back somewhere here. But probably over the course of time with technology and convenience and all this shit, it's going to slowly move back here. But we already popped to that direction. So I think that that hard kind of forced set of, if you will, like a 90-degree turn, no one's going to, in 3 months, this isn't going to be something we forgot. Now, in a year, it might be something like, oh, that coronavirus shit was crazy. Everybody, whatever the hell is the long-term kind of impression of this, or maybe 5 years later, it's like, wow, that was a crazy time, and it was a blip. But I don't think when it comes to the business engagement, the business operations, that that'll be something that's forgotten, because I think it's so terrifying to so many people that there's going to have to be a long-term kind of planned response from every business on how to move forward. And I think that's the most relevant point of this whole thing when it comes to businesses. It's not our short-term loss, it's our long-term opportunity, where we get to see into the future very quickly now. And I think things kind of bounce back more towards normal, but then we can continue kind of pushing ourselves and growing towards what the future is going to be.
Right. And you know, I see just from the comments that we have a lot of people from basically around the world. We have somebody from Germany. We have a few people here in North Carolina. You have people around the U.S., people in Florida watching, Dominican Republic. So I think it's just kind of curious of how did you manage to grow your brand so that it's not only has like a local footprint, but like a global footprint, basically?
That's a good question. So we started out selling in U.S., and then I went to Germany to the trade show over there, and started actually first in Sweden. So I went over to do like market research, and then I met a guy who's now my Swedish distributor named Martin. And he said, okay, let's get started. So that was like September. So in December, I went to Sweden to launch the brand in Sweden, kind of accidentally. And at that point in time, we didn't have a ton of product. We were really backward on a lot of stuff. And our brand was going very well in the US, but there wasn't so much that we could do at that point in time, just because we had a lot of back order. So I went over to kind of like start planning for the future for our expansion into like international markets. And, you know, slowly but surely over the course of 12 or 18 months, I was traveling a lot domestically and a lot internationally, and started opening more markets, not necessarily, oh, you know, we make a deal and you get cigars tomorrow, but you make a deal in December, we're going to launch in your country in April. So we were able to kind of like choreograph and really plan out our international expansion. And for good and for bad, because at that point in time, again, I'm not really great with social media. So you know, that people see me, I'm in Sweden, or I'm in Switzerland, or I'm in France, or I'm in Germany. And everyone thought I was fucking off and I was on vacation. And the whole time I was working, expanding the brand. So now we're currently in something like 32 countries. It's a very broadly, globally distributed brand. And it was built that way, but at that, I got a lot of flack actually in that point about 4 years ago for doing that. And then when the FDA hammer came down really hard, is when you saw a lot of domestic brands reaching internationally to try to set up distribution. But these countries don't work like we work. There's not room in these countries for so many brands or for so many boutique brands. So we already had our foot in the door. So we've been able to maintain that pretty well and grow it, which has been really nice. But it wasn't without its headaches. And even today, I mean, I still have retailers domestically. They're like, "Oh, you're always on vacation, you know, in Germany or whatever." And I'm like,
You're like, you're working.
"Yeah." I'm like, "Man, I'm over there trying to sell cigars." And actually, funny enough, I had one of my reps that I rewarded with a trip to go to Germany to help sell cigars with me, and he was like, "Can we see some sights?" And I'm like, "This is a business trip." But even his impression was, you know, you got an event and you're fucking around for the entire day or the rest of the week. So, but yeah, the Europe thing and what's expanded since there has been interesting, because we started in Europe and then it just kind of like started growing. So now we sell in Asian markets, some of the Middle East. We're selling in South America. We sell in Africa, through the Caribbean. So we have a really diverse kind of channel, which is cool.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it too, though, has to do. I mean, like you said, you like on your social media, like you said, sometimes you're there, you're the feature in the picture or the video, but a lot of times this is your product. So
Yeah.
I do think you have a lot of to do with it, because you know, being at a trade show like every year at IPSPR, PCA, whatever you want to call it now. I mean, your booth is packed. and it's busy, and it's like you have to schedule like weeks and ahead of time to get 5 minutes with you. I
Yeah.
mean, so I think, but and people want to see you. They don't just want to see the rep at that point. I mean, they want to sit down and speak to you. So I think that has a lot to say about that you as the brand that you built and the entrepreneur that you are, that people kind of look to you. And I think it's because too, it's like you are pretty candid. Like what you see is what you get. You know, you're not one of these industry people who have like a certain personality that you're trying to put out there. And I
Yeah.
think people like that realness that they're going to get from you, and they expect that also from your you know, the cigars that you put out with your name on it.
Well, thank you. I do think that some people don't get it though.
Yeah, I was looking back at when I was preparing for this chat. I was looking back at the interview that we did, and it was just for people who don't know, it was in this issue, the May-June 2018. And I remember I asked you a question in there about, you know, what's the biggest misconception people have about you? And you said that you're an asshole. And you said because you are to a degree, but you aren't, and people just don't understand I guess like sometimes like what you're doing
Yeah.
or why you come off in a certain way. And I found you to be probably the most approachable person, you know, in the industry. Like you're the only person I could say that I can reach out to an email and get a response back like within that same day. There's some people who it goes on like weeks, you know, days, weeks, you know, and then they're like, oh yeah, and it's like an afterthought. But
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that's just how your customer service and your business acumen is.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and I think that some of the misconceptions, I mean, I don't even know where the misconceptions come from. I'm somewhat, I think, unapproachable. I'm a really tall guy. I am very opinionated, stuff like that. So I think that kind of is some of it. And then, I don't know. And I mean, I am an asshole. I'm not like a nice guy, but at the same time, I'm the asshole, but I'm not the asshole that they think I am, if that makes sense.
And that's exactly what you
You know what
said
I
in the
mean?
interview. So, and it's, you know, it's like you said, you are pretty tall because everybody has to look up to you. I have to look up to most people because I'm pretty short. But I mean, when you start talking to you, like I said, it's probably one of the easiest conversations. You're easy to talk to. You're very candid. You know what you're going to get. You know, you can ask you any kind of question. You're going to get like the real answer, which is nice in any industry, but especially in the cigar industry. Because
Well,
sometimes
thank
you
you.
get like a runaround or a corporate answer that you know isn't true, and you're like, you have to wait a couple weeks for it to come out on somebody else's website what the truth was, and you're like, oh, that explains it.
Yeah.
That's not the case with you. So I like your approach to business and how you are basically in life, that you are pretty forthcoming and pretty much you.
Well, thank you. I'm glad it's well received.
um, so talk us a second about, because another thing that was in that interview that we talked about was the theme of collaboration, because you will collaborate with a lot of people and different people, and you'll see the mix of personalities. Like you've had the, you know, you work close with Tony Bellotto for La Barba cigars. You with Ventura to make the cigars. You know, Jonathan Drew you've worked with. So just talk a little bit about your approach to figuring out who you're going to work with and how those go.
Sure. So, I mean, we started our brand with Henderson Ventura and his father. That was King is Dead, Long Live the King, Eastern Standard. And I mean, very kind of easy methodology. We wanted to specialize with working with rare and very well-aged tobacco. So we wanted to deliver a flavor profile that was, well, I have a hard way actually of trying to describe it, but we wanted to give something that was familiar but different, or familiar but unexpected. So where when somebody would smoke the cigar, they'd say, aha. So it was something that identified with what their palate enjoyed, but maybe it was a slightly different experience than they were used to, if that makes sense. So we focused primarily on Dominican tobacco, and the reason that we did that was you have Central America, you have something, let's say like 9 major strains of tobacco. It's even less than that, but like 4, 5, 6, let's just say 10, 9 for to give argument, unique tobaccos that are grown there. Cuba, you have like 1.5, 2. Dominican Republic, you had something like 160 unique varietals and kind of like micro strains of tobacco that were grown, whether it was stuff that had been genetically engineered, if you will, but in an organic way, just year over year by a small family farm, this type of stuff, through the course of time to give them a unique profile to their tobacco. So the problem that we ran into, and the problem that a lot of companies have, is when you're making cigars and you're a big company, you make cigars to be consistent, have high quality, and be able to provide the quantity necessary. So all big companies need those three elements. So when you're in Central America, you have 3-4 tobaccos, Cuba, again, 1.5, 2. And then Dominican Republic, even though you have all these different variety of tobacco available to you, you really can only rely on 5, 6. So you end up with a very similar number to what you're dealing with outside of that country. So what happens in DR, you have all these smaller crops of tobacco that actually get folded into kind of like larger sales of tobacco, or if a company's looking for a limited edition or a special edition or a small production cigar, they would then utilize those tobaccos to be used for that. So in my time making cigars, I found that you could find a lot more variety coming out of DR if you were focusing on these smaller things that other companies were relying on exclusively for limited editions, and also working with farmers that were working on test crops or small growths that they weren't quite sure yet what they were going to do with. So we could be first to market with something that was going to be something kind of like a new variation of a tobacco being produced. So we focused on those on our core stuff out of the gate. So that was King is Dead, Long Live the King, Eastern Standard. And then we extended that same principle to basically all of our Dominican productions. But what we found was, because the nature of Caldwell is going to be very, very well aged on the current scale of tobacco, let's say that's 1 to 10 in terms of general strength or spiciness, pepperness, any of those things that a lot of guys look for in the US market, we could only get to like a 6. So we could specialize in what we specialize with, which was really like Dominican style production with Dominican tobacco, or a Dominican kind of ethos to the way that we treat tobacco and blend cigars. So we started working with other companies to kind of diversify what we did, because at the end of the day, if we're a wine company, we can't only make Alexander Valley Pinot Noir to fit the palate of me as a wine drinker, if that's what I drank. You have to have other stuff in your portfolio.
Right.
So even though some of these products and some of these concepts were maybe outside of our regular wheelhouse with what we were able to develop, we started working with other companies to do that. So we did Blind Man's Bluff, made in Honduras with Davidoff, and that was supposed to be a more run-of-the-mill, everyday, achievable, higher volume brand. Worked with Jonathan Drew again on a lot of Kings to produce something that was much fuller bodied, using tobaccos outside anything we'd ever worked with. Worked with Ernesto Perez Carrillo with Anastasia. That was something completely different. We'd never done anything like that before. That was using very well-aged tobacco, very special, different processed tobacco. And then, again, worked with Tony Bellato with his La Barba line. And then worked with Matt and also AJ on the T and Hit and Run. So we really just kind of reached out, I guess, outside of our expertise to try to work with people that did things different than we did. Because at the end of the day, I like to have a correlation. If I'm a French chef, I'm used to working in a French kitchen with French ingredients. So if I go to an Italian kitchen with Italian ingredients, I'm still going to have my French kind of take on it. But the material, the culture, the experience of creating that dinner is going to be entirely different. So now I'm going to make something that doesn't necessarily apply to only a French consumer, but also maybe applies to an Italian consumer as well. So you can broaden your reach a little bit and get outside of your box of your everyday kind of like production standards, if you will, and flavor profiles and everything that you do. So for us, the opportunity to collaborate was very cool because we were able to do a lot of stuff. So if you smoke the Tea or you smoke All Out Kings, they're night and day compared to our Dominican brands. They have nothing to do with it. Hopefully you can taste like my touch, but the profile of the cigar is going to be very different. Hopefully the experience is similar, but the flavor and the profile is going to be far outside of what you're used to smoking our Dominican productions. It's like a 90-minute response.
I know that the Tea Connecticut was an awesome cigar, because I know Matt gave me one of those to try at one point, and he's like, try this, you'll like it. And I was like, okay. And I tried it, and it was wasn't just TPE, but the TPE prior to that. And I thought that was like a great cigar. So
thank you.
I think you all did a great job on that. And somebody said, could you talk a little bit about Lost and Found? Because I don't know if people know a lot about that, which would be a cool thing to kind of talk about.
Yeah,
What that
absolutely.
is.
So Lost and Found was started, also that was something that was started entirely on accident. I have a lot of, well, I have a lot of manufacturers that I'm very friendly with. So over the course of years, dating all the way back to my hotel business, I'd go down to Dominican Republic, Honduras, Nicaragua, meet with factories, talk to them, whether it was private label manufacturing for me or just guys that I was a vendor with. Okay, I'm going down to DR, I'll visit a couple factories just like retailers do. So I got very friendly with a lot of brands. And also that company, we were selling cigars to Ritz-Carlton, Four Seasons, companies like that, higher end hotel chains. So a lot of those cigar companies wanted to have their products available on those menus. So I was received with open arms a lot of places. And I have always been an avid cigar consumer. So I'd say, hey, what happened to this cigar? And then they'd say, oh, well, we have 1,200 of those cigars in the aging room. Or what happened to that cigar? Oh, well, we stopped producing that cigar, but we have some here. So I'd kind of get my little goodies and bring them back and I'd smoke them. So one time I'd gone to Dominican Republic. I was working like kind of just kicking tires after the Winwood cigar thing, before the Caldwell thing, started to work with Venturas. And I visited a couple of the factories, got a couple bundles. And then I flew up to hang out with Tony Bellato in Ohio. And I gave him the cigars. And he's like, man, these are amazing. What are they? And I'm like, well, that's this. And he's like, well, how'd you get that cigar? They stopped making that cigar 8 years ago. I'm like, I don't know. I just asked if they had any. They gave me a bundle. That's what I do, you know? And he's like, well, we should do something with these. And Jacqueline Sears was there, who was one of the original partners with Lost and Found. And so Tony says, can you get me a bunch of these cigars? So I said, yeah, how many you want? So he says, I want whatever, 2,000 of each or whatever's available. So I said, how do you want them? He's like, butcher paper, 10 counts, just ship them in. I said, okay. Order the cigars, ship them to him. So in the meantime, Jacqueline had come up with this idea of branding them in really, really fun and quirky and kind of stupid ways. They put stickers on them. He put them on the shelf of his store. And he started selling them slowly, slowly, slowly. And then we launched Caldwell. We got a lot of immediate attention and success with the brand. Somehow, I think it was Cigar Cartel, a couple pictures got posted. Guys freaked out. So Tony called me a few days later, and he's like, hey, we need more of those cigars. I'm like, you just got like 6,000, 7,000 of them a couple of weeks ago. What happened? He's like, sold them all. And we were just off to the races. So that's a really fun project. I mean, just working with other manufacturers, finding old gems. So it works a bunch of ways. They discontinue a size. It's been sitting around for a while. It's a limited edition. They had an overrun of 1,000 cigars, or it was color sorted out because it's too light or too dark to go with the current productions. Then those kind of just sit there till they find something to do with them. So I'm constantly reaching out to other brands and other companies, send me your inventory list, ordering samples, smoking them. So the one thing with Lost and Found, I've never sold a cigar that I didn't like. So everything there kind of identifies with my palate or Jacqueline's selections or Tony's selections. And it's a really cool way to allow a consumer to taste a cigar which is aged 4 or 5 years, 3 years, 10 years, whatever it is. We just had a really small one that went to a store called Anthony's out in Arizona. Most of it, we shipped a little bit to Harry's Havana Hut in New York, and Queens got some, but it's called Jello Cello. So
I saw that one.
Jello. Yeah, and it's funny because it's the way that, Dominican pronounces yellow. They say Jello. So Jello Cello. So it's got the Jello logo. But the cellophane on that shit, I mean, that was a Connecticut wrapper. Do you know how long it takes for a Connecticut wrapper to turn gold? It takes forever. So that cigar is like 11 years old. And so that was fun because those cigars, I guess they were ordered for somebody. They were coming in as nude bulk bundles, and they just sat there for like 11 years. And then I tried them. I'm like, what is this? And then normally we would not take them with a yellow on it, but it was the cellophane, but it was so cool. I just said, leave the cello on it because that's the brand, the Jello Cello. So, and funny enough, they didn't come from Henderson, but Henderson was with me when I found him. He was with me, and he goes, "Oh, look at the Jello Cello," and I go, "That's it. That's the brand." So,
Somebody asked, what cigar are you most proud of that you've made?
Anastasia, the original, hands down. I love that cigar. That's my baby. My baby was Eastern Standard, but then I abandoned it, Anastasia Original. But that being said, we don't make Anastasia, the original blend, anymore. So it would be Eastern Standard of our regular production.
How do you go about choosing the names for these cigars? You have a different naming and just a different branding from like anybody in the industry, which is great because you just
Yeah.
look at it and just say that's Caldwell.
I don't, stuff just pops in my head. So I'll be walking on the street, I'll see something. So I'll see a name that is cool, or I'll read something. I'm like, man, that's a cool sounding name. Listening to music. So a lot of stuff comes like that. And then I just have like a brand book that I write, like I just kind of scribble in. So hundreds of pages of random shit. And then I play connect the dots. So I'll start looking back through it, and then I'll come up with a concept from there to develop the name further. And then a lot of the color and the brand color combination stuff like that. A lot of that stuff, like I'll see like a logo of a business or a candy wrapper or something like that, and I'm like, man, that's really cool. That works very well. Or cologne packaging, like the tea, the original tea, the gray box. The gray box has got a little bit of orange on it. That's from Hugo Boss cologne. Is that I think it was Hugo Boss. Anyways, but I looked at the packaging color combination. I'm like, man, this is fucking awesome. And then I took a picture of it, and then I went and color coded it to find what were the colors exactly and worked from there. So a lot of it I hijack in that way. So I just see good stuff that looks good, that combines in a good way. And then a lot of it just kind of stuff pops in my head. So it's kind of all over the place.
And in terms of the art on your cigars, I mean, who does that art? Where does that come from? Because I have a few here that I wanted to show. You have, this great, I don't know if people can see that well, but, this great ornate, like flashy artwork that you wouldn't, expect to see on a cigar. I think that's Anastasia. I mean, where does this come from?
So when I was working with Christian Aroa, we had a factory in an area of Miami that's now very cool and popular. It's called Wynwood.
Mm-hmm.
But when I opened up that building, it was like run down, very, very dangerous neighborhood. And the reason that I went there was because it was the cheapest rent in town. So it became like a very cool kind of arts district. And at the time, they'd already had a lot of art kind of involved in the neighborhood, like big murals and stuff like that. But I'm talking like going back 15 years, it's been like that. And so I became friendly with a lot of artists as they come in and out of town during Art Basel, the huge art fair that we have here in Miami, stuff like that. And then I also had a lot of really good walls. So I had my building, I had two 100-foot walls and then a 50-foot facade. And then there was a vacant lot that I had next to me that had an 80-foot wall. And then the facade of the opposing building was like 120 feet. So these artists would come to town and they want to paint these murals to utilize all the wall space. And we were in this cool neighborhood. So I just got to know a lot of artists. So I'd come up with a brand concept or a name. And then I'd reach out to some of these artists that I knew and I'd say, hey, can you do me a favor? Can we do something together? So most of our art comes from an artist called Evoca One. The ones that you just showed, the like kind of Child King, those are Evoca One. He's Dominican artist based here in Miami now. And just said, hey, here's the name, here's the concept. I want a young king, kind of oversized crown. Can you work on something for me? And then the other one, the Anastasia, that's a kid named Jade, that's out of Peru, Jade Rivera. And same thing, I said, hey, I want, Anastasia, who's Tsar Nicholas's daughter. She wasn't necessarily the most attractive woman when you look up the pictures, but I'm like, I need like a sexier version of this. So he just kind of created me like a really cool thing. And then also that one was a project together with Ernesto Carrillo, and his legendary brand was La Gloria Cubana. So we wanted to use, like an elegant female as part of the imagery, kind of as a nod to his history in the industry. So that's why our only female in a band is Anastasia, kind of as a hat tip to him to where he started.
Wow.
So, yeah, but we got a few different artists that we work with, all like that, just kind of guys I became friends with just coincidentally, and then I lean on them to help me. So
somebody says, what made Wynwood Factory so successful?
Our concept. So what we did out of Wynwood, we didn't age cigars. We used really aged tobacco that was typically very sweet. So cigars will go through like a funky stage. Normally you roll them, you need to age them, and then you smoke them and they taste good. So normally they'll taste good right off the table, but then after about a week or 10 days, they start getting funky. So when you combine the tobaccos together, they act like sponges, but sponges that also release. So they're releasing, they're sharing. So they're like going through this wetting process where ammonia, things like that, or maybe some unpleasant flavors are kind of like leaking out of them and they're getting absorbed by the other one, and then they're just sharing and they're kind of mixing together. And so tobaccos are releasing and sharing, and you don't have something that's harmonious. So it takes a while for this to happen with a tobacco, and then the harmony kind of comes back together after typically 35 to 90 days of aging in the aging room. But if you use very well-aged tobacco, and you won't have as much of that. And then if you use very sweet tobacco, sweet being Corojo or Habano, it'll compensate for any of the little bitter or acrid experience that you might have in the cigar. So Winwood, we rolled, packed, and shipped the same day. So you have a retail store, you buy the cigars from us on Tuesday, we ship them on Tuesday. So, or you place the order with us Wednesday, we ship it maybe the next Monday, but they were made Monday, packed, and shipped the same day. So we were able to ship cigars all over the country. The retailer got fresh rolled cigars on their table. They could sell them, hey, these were rolled yesterday, or even a week later, hey, these were rolled a week ago. But none of the cigars went through this funky stage. So none of them had to be laid down to rest. So a lot of guys, when they get a fresh cigar, you can smoke it for a period of time. Then it starts getting funky. You got to lay it down. So I think our concept was very different because we allowed retailers and consumers to have fresh rolled cigars that tasted really fresh for about a 30-day period, and then they just tasted good after that. So they didn't get better or worse with age. They just kind of got a little bit different after about 30 days, but maybe 20 days. So till about 20 days, you could really taste that freshness on the cigar. And it's a very unique experience, and it was something that hadn't happened before in the cigar industry. And I think that's what drove the success of that brand and that factory.
So we have a couple people, and I think you touched on this a little bit, but they're still very interested in how do you come up with the names of your cigars. So one person says, why MMF as a name, and another person says, how do you come up with the names for your cigars? So this is obviously one of those, Caldwell, I think, unique things, because you usually don't question the name of a cigar, but I mean, sometimes your names do make people do a double take. So
yeah,
how do you do that?
So the MMF, the Mad Mofo, is the most innocent brand name you ever could have had. It was called Mad for Maduro, MF Mata Fina. It was the blend name on the factory level, was Maduro Mata Fina, because that's what we started with on that cigar. So the whole way through the blending process, that blend was MADMF, Maduro Mata Fina. But then what do we call the Long Live the King Maduro? And I'm like, let's call it Mad MF. It's a cool name, and it's the blend code, and it creates the question. So great. Well, after about a little bit of time, we started receiving cease and desists from a certain company that may or may not have the initials MF, threatening to sue us and shit like that. So then our solution was, okay, friendly agreement. We burned out all the packaging on that, sold it all over the course of time, and then changed it to Mofo, because everyone thought MF was short for motherfucker. So then we just said, okay, let's roll with it. So we kept it as MF. And then the rest of the names, I mean, some of them are more complex, but a couple of them, like King is Dead, Long Live the King. I originally wanted to have two cigars that complemented each other. So King is Dead, historically, you'd never not have a king. So the minute the king was dead, they'd say the king is dead, long live the king, and everyone, King is dead, oh, long live the king, yeah. So there was always a child king. So the child king was Long Live the King, young guy, big crown, and then King is Dead, the broken throne. And then those cigars, the ideal experience for smoking those cigars, you smoke King is Dead. It sets up your palate in a unique way where Long Live the King tastes different. Not better, but different for having smoked King is Dead first. So we decided not to market the cigars that way because nobody got it. So they thought that you had to smoke one for the other one to taste good. So we dropped that immediately, but that's where those names came from. And then we had Eastern Standard. I stole that name off a cocktail list at a bar in Miami. I'm like, that's a fucking great name. Let's go with it. And then Last Czar, we had to correlate Eastern Standard back into King is Dead, Long Live the King, because King is Dead, Long Live the King were over here, and then Eastern Standard's over here, and they were uncorrelated. So the Eastern limited edition was called Last Czar. So now you're tying the royalty in back to these brands by having Last Czar. So Eastern guy, so Tsar Nicholas from Russia, Eastern, now tied into King is Dead, Long Live the King, and then his daughter was Anastasia, so we tied that in. So just a lot of stuff like that. I mean, some of it's far more interesting than others, and then some of them just kind of just rolled with it.
I mean, going from that, and we have about 15 minutes left or so, but I mean, when you look at your company, I mean, where do you want to go from here? Because I know there are some companies that say, in the cigar industry especially, like, they have a certain idea of a level they want to hit, and they don't want to go beyond that level because it goes beyond what they can comfortably handle. And then there's other companies that say, I want to go big. I don't know, no limit. So where do you fall in this spectrum?
The companies that want to go big haven't hit those ceilings yet. So, or they haven't broken through them. So we started out with kind of like this target of 1 million cigars a year. That was like our ultimate goal. We hit that target, I think, within about 18 months. And then we said, okay, we want to get to 2 million cigars a year. And then we hit that target. And then we want to get to 4 million cigars, which we're not anywhere near 4 million cigars. But what we noticed was after about, well, somewhere between 1.5 million and 2.2 million cigars a year, the wheels started falling off. It started getting very complicated. Managing packaging, managing inventory, managing all the relationships, making sure we had this, making sure we had that, staying on top of the business because the business got so much bigger that it became more of a business and less of a I always say the perfect combination for a cigar manufacturer is 49% passion, 51% business, because it's great to have 51% passion, but then if you're only passionate and you're not paying more attention to the operations of the business, the wheels are going to fall off. And then the other way, vice versa, you stop enjoying what you're doing. So you have to be very balanced, but let's say slightly more on the business side of it. Because at the end of the day, if you can't put gas in your car, your car can't move forward. So you have to keep your eye on that first. And all the big brands do that, and all the big boutiques do that. We all really kind of like have that harmony, I'd say. But as you continue to grow and as you continue to build, the work becomes more work, and it becomes less of something that you do to maintain the enjoyment of what you do as a brand owner. And I think that we kind of hit that threshold about a year ago with our eyes on the prize of growing, growing, growing. And then somewhere last year, we just said, we're good. We're happy to do what we do. We're happy to produce what we produce. Let's just instead try to simplify what we do, enjoy it more. If we're having problems in any part of our business, let's just eliminate the problems and continue to focus on making the best cigars we can, customer engagement, dealing with the retailers in a special way, and stop trying to chase. So for us, I think a perfect size is probably 2 million cigars a year. I think when we crossed that threshold, we started kind of becoming more of a business and more concerned with business things. And we started losing the balance that we'd had as a boutique brand. And I think that was noticeable from myself to my business partners, Jeremy, my manager, the salespeople. We started noticing, we started getting to a point where we weren't enjoying ourselves in the same way that we had, the years prior. So we kind of got back to that zen fourth quarter last year. And since then, we've been having a hell of a time and doing everything that we've done since the beginning and doing it as we wanted to do. And that's the other thing, too. When you get too big, you're not necessarily moving in the current that you want to flow. You're moving where the current's flowing.
All right.
And so now you're a passenger instead of the driver. And that's something I think very relevant to any brand our size and smaller. It just gets maybe a little bit outside of your control when you set the bar too high.
Have you been inspired any by this kind of weird period that we're in? I mean, this whole year, just even before coronavirus, has just been weird because I know the cigar industry itself is going through some changes and maybe some growing pains. I mean, we started off the year with different sides of the industry kind of, I guess, arguing with each other about what this and that is. And now we're here in coronavirus, and it's like we're not even halfway through the year. And it's been probably like a very long year, it feels like. So has this year so far inspired you to do anything differently, or to start any new projects, or have you seen any new opportunities maybe?
I think a lot of that's to be determined, but I think what it did was it like very firmly underlined a lot of our sentiments coming into the end of last year, which were, again, trying to focus on what we do and not getting too big and not getting too kind of like vulnerable. Because we started, just trying to consolidate power back to the base of what we've done through the years, not ourselves as owners, not ourselves as a company, but just getting a grip on everything where we had as much control over all the variables as we did. Because again, we're steering the boat, we're not passengers. And I think that it very, very firmly underlined what were our actions coming into the close of last year and encourage us. There were a lot of things, there were a lot of great ideas that we had in terms of operations and understanding the market that have been constant conversation between myself, my partners, our in-house guys, our management, with like, this is what we think, this is what we feel, and kind of tiptoeing into those situations. And now I think that those things are far more understood to have been correct. You know, like one of the things that you do as a company owner, you know, like, here's the business, and then it goes forever. It's like Amazon, it goes forever, like all the way out the door. And so we said, okay, what we want to do is we want to say, okay, let's focus on this end of the business, this part of it. And let's just do that really, really well. We don't need to have that never-ending tail of shit. Let's just do what we do, our best job. And then my business partners and our sales guys and everybody's like, yeah, but at the end of the tail, there's still money. And that's how Amazon makes money. We're not fucking Amazon. So we need to focus on this part of the tail, which is what we do well and where the revenue that we've always generated has come from. And let's not focus on the end of the tail. And for us as a business, that idea of refocusing has been very encouraged through this, because it shows you the vulnerability of having too much exposure. Because if your tail's too long, you're too exposed. And so I think that was important. And then me also personally, a wake-up call, I fucking hate social media. And I will never go on social media for myself as a private individual. But I'll put on my boots, I'll get in the trench, and I'll go on social media to connect to my consumers and my retailers, because it's a great asset that we all have free exposure to. So I've learned a lot, I think, with that on a personal level. And then count your blessings, man. You know, I think that there's been so much infighting, there's been so much fear, there's been so much bullshit in this industry for the last 5 years, that now it's just back to basics. Like, why do we all do what we do? And it could be worse. Because I've always said, well, if you want to make money as a retailer, why don't you open a fucking Quiznos or whatever it is? Maybe if you had a Quiznos, you'd be selling some sandwiches right now. Maybe you'd be shut the fuck down.
Yeah.
A lot of cigar retail is still open, you know? So I think it's just back to what, I think there's no such thing as a bad crisis long term. There's no such thing. It makes you buckle up your bootstraps. It makes you get ready for war. The fear motivates you. You know, the uncertainty of the future makes you kind of steady your course into the future. And I think that that's a personal thing as well as a business thing for anybody. All these things in life kind of like, they make us ride our ships, whether it's personally or business. And I think everybody, a great example for you. I ride my bike, and I've always ridden my bike a lot. So I ride my bike up and down like a road in Miami. And I ride my bike, and I ride my bike, I ride my bike. Nobody ever says anything to you. Nobody says hi. And that's what I love about Miami. I don't like friendly people. So people just kind of like, they look at you mean and shit. Like, whatever.
I know. I lived there for a year.
There you go. So it's like, who the fuck are you is the look. So now I'm riding my bike, and people are like waving at you. Like, we're all a team now. So people like, they give you the what's up, or they're like, hey, good morning. But everyone's so scared shitless that, I mean, it's like somewhere in their subliminal, they're praying to whatever God they think is there, that they hope that whatever could happen doesn't happen. And I think the entire world is having a come to Jesus moment where we're all being much more friendly and a little bit more concerned about everybody else instead of just ourselves. And we're extending ourselves in a different way in that sense. And I think that that's going to be true with business too. Because I think that the relationships that we've been kind of like just passing by are going to have a new meaning on the back end of this. And it's going to have a new meaning because the fear that everybody's consumed with, whether it's economic or health, is going to draw people together. You're going to have more teamwork. I think this is something that's going to bring the country together and the world together, because all of a sudden we're all in the same. Denied it. But the world's never been on the same page.
Right.
And I feel like now the world is. And I think if the world's on the same page, the country's on the same page, the state, the city, retailers, consumers, all of a sudden we're all the same guy. And I think that that's a very healthy thing, you know, to get us all sound footing moving forward.
All right. So for our last question, this is a real quick question. If you had to pick one cigar for all of us to go out, one Caldwell cigar, of course, to go out and smoke right now, what would that one cigar be?
I can't give you one. If you're a mild to medium smoker, Eastern Standard. If you're a medium plus to full bodied smoker, Long Live the King, Mad Mofo. You can't just say one.
It's so
That's like
choice.
White wine or red wine. White wine or red wine. Ah, Christian Fong, what's up, man? My homeboy from when I was very young.
Before we run out of time, I just want to say thank you so much for taking an hour out of your time to speak to us. I mean, I think we could easily go on for another hour, but I want to save some for maybe another episode of this. But it's been great speaking to you as always. So I wanted to thank you, like I said, for taking that time out today and doing this, because it's been cool to kind of be able to speak to you without the usual hustle and bustle of a trade show, because that's where we usually see each other.
Yeah, man, my pleasure. And thank you for all you guys do for the industry.
Oh, no problem. This is what we're here for. So we look forward to kind of continuing to tell your story wherever appropriate.
I appreciate it.
Cool. Well, like I said, people can follow you on Instagram, or they can follow the company on Instagram. I think you have a Facebook page.
Yeah, Caldwell Cigars, or my personal also. I think I'm very negligent with a company page. The best way is Instagram, though, absolutely, because either myself or my business partner Hernando check that constantly, and we're very quick to respond. If you have any questions or concerns, comments, suggestions, feel free to reach out. Look, my mom approves of the interview.
I say we got your mom's approval, so we did good.
There you go.
Well, like I said, I look forward to our next encounter, wherever that is, whether it's PCA or some other event, whenever they can continue this year. So I look forward to our next encounter, our next conversation. But I hope you have a great day, and hope you all continue to do well, and look forward to, like I said, watching your story continue.
Likewise. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.
You too.